Welcome to Lessons That Last, where a researcher and a teacher talk about what it means to make a lasting impact on students' lives. They unpack the stories former students shared about their memorable teachers and discuss how we can all make a greater impact on the people in our lives. Here's Julie and Laura.
Hello, and welcome back to the Lessons That Last podcast. I'm Julie Hassan, professor, researcher, and with me is my always charming co-host,
Laura Estes Swilly, teacher, writer, and this summer, learner.
So what are you learning this summer?
This summer, I'm taking a course offered by the state of Florida to teach us how civics should be taught in our schools. It's huge. They say it's a 55-hour course, but I'm pretty sure it's going to take me about 100 hours based on how long what I've already done is taking. And so it's just, it's a lot to digest. So far, I've been learning about the intellectual influences on the founders.
Wow. Mm-hmm. When I heard you talk to me a couple weeks ago about having to take that, it's a required course for all Florida teachers.
It's not required. This is not actually, they haven't required it yet. But because I think probably for civics teachers or history teachers, maybe it's required, but it was open to all teachers. And I really wanted to know how they were looking at changing the curriculum. How is this different from what we learned about the founding of the United States, the creation of all of our frameworks? So I signed up because I want to know what the kids are learning.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about who has input into what our kids are learning, but also when you think about history and civics, whose stories are told.
Yes.
And whose stories are silent.
Correct.
So yeah, that is interesting.
That's why I'm taking it. I want to know what is amplified and what is being diminished in the new way of telling these stories and ushering our students into profitable citizenship. In the end, we want an educated electorate. We want people who understand their country and the process that created their country and the process that keeps their country running. And so I want to know what that is being taught.
I was thinking quite a bit the other day just about representation. Actually, I've been at a lot of conferences this summer. And I've been paying attention to the keynote presenters. And so I just have been thinking about representation. Like, who do we put on a stage? Who gets to have a platform and tell their story? And I think representation in so many ways is so interesting right now. But certainly representation in our civics courses and history courses is strong messaging, right?
Yes, I agree. So jury is still out on what I'm going to find because I really am only just at the module about intellectual influences is 16 lessons long.
Wow.
And I'm on the 4th of that. So I'm only a quarter of the way through all of these intellectual influences. So I can't say what's being amplified yet. So
I think they're just trying to test and see if you will persevere.
I know. They want to know how much time do I really have over the summer. This is the test.
How dedicated are you to really understanding this? Because I'm not sure they really want people like you questioning this anyway.
Oh, well, there's not really a mechanism.
There's not a mode to question. There will be no questions.
No, there's no questions. This is very similar to some college courses, not any, really not education courses that I took, but more like gen ed type stuff in college, where the professor tells you what they want you to think and you repeat it on a test.
Oh, do people teach like that?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been hanging in the College of Ed for a couple of decades, but wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we teach ours how to ask good questions. We have a whole course on that.
Right. No, I mean, so, and maybe some of our listeners know that The Great Gatsby is like the cornerstone book of my career. It's what made me want to be a teacher. It's what made me want to teach English. And so I've read it so many times. And by the time I hit American Lit in college, I had probably read it 5 or 6 times, had studied it, had written lots of papers on it. And I didn't agree with my professor's interpretation of the green light. And so I answered the question on a test my way, and then I got it wrong because I didn't give him back his thought. And so, and that was in a literature class, which is usually a place where we want to hear what people are thinking and how we're interacting with text. So yeah, I think if you polled undergrad students, you might hear more of that than you think. And so this is along those lines. Here's what we want you to know, and we want you to tell us what you know, because we told you what to know.
Parrot back.
Yeah.
Which is really memorization and not...
Well, but it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
I was thinking as we prepared for this story today about how we teach kids important lessons and how sometimes the most powerful, important lessons, oftentimes I'll say, don't come from our curriculum.
No.
Certainly don't come from really direct instruction. There are lessons that come from modeling and opportunities and conversations and kids for themselves noticing injustices and choosing to act. So as a high school teacher right now in Florida, which is a really difficult thing to navigate, how do you see kids learning about how to be citizens of their school, of their community, of their world?
So it's hard because this wave of change has only just begun. So my students are not affected by it yet, so much as like how they're learning and what they're learning. And I can see how that is changing based on what I'm learning in this course. So that hasn't touched my kids yet because they're so much older. Mm-hmm. But I have noticed that my students pay attention to way more than we did. I think that they're far more observant than we were about what's happening around them. And they are also far more open to everyone doing their own thing than we were. They want everyone to have the same opportunities. They want people to be treated fairly. Nothing will rile up a high school campus more than unfairness. We have to be treated fairly, and that means everyone, not just more fairness for me, but everyone's treated the same. They're looking for a lot of equity around them and fairness around them. How do they do that? I don't know. I don't know how they learned that. I would love to. I don't know. I'd love to say it's their families.
But if we think about so many of the adults right now in our country who would be the models for our high school kids, there's this fear that if you have more rights, then I'm going to have less.
Yes.
Right? It's this, I don't even know how to explain it except to say it's a fear that if someone else gains, then I lose. It's a zero sum game.
Like there's only one pie, and that's it. You can never have another pie. And really, when it comes, I think when it comes to rights and fairness and equity, there's unlimited pie. you don't lose anything for me to be treated fairly, and vice versa. And I feel like, and I'm not saying all of them 100% to the one, but by and large, they get it. They just get it. They get that. Maybe because they're still in school, which is pretty, it's an institution and a bureaucracy and all the things that we could say that is bad about a school. They're witnessing fairness, they're witnessing equality, they're witnessing equity, and everyone having the same rights, and they're realizing they've lost nothing. And so it doesn't seem to worry them for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, I love that our kids are coming out of school somehow miraculously with this idea that if any of us rises, we all rise. That's a very different narrative. And
now, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that they believe.
I've stretched it a little too far.
Because I'm not saying that they're like, we're intertwined. And
we're not holding hands.
Rises, we all rise. They're just saying your rise does not affect mine. It doesn't bother me.
Okay. Got it.
Now, I am a proponent in my classroom. When one of us wins, all of us win. And we live that. And I don't know what's happening in other classrooms and around the country. I'm sure that is an attitude that we're all trying to help our students embrace. And so maybe they will, but I don't think they're exactly there where you want them to be quite yet.
Yeah. And, we think it is the civics curriculum or the history textbook.
Right.
But what I find when I talk to kids and teachers in schools is that they figure things out about our culture by what we celebrate and what we tolerate.
Yes.
And we can have whatever kind of civics curriculum we want, but what we celebrate and what we tolerate reveals our culture.
Absolutely. I had a conversation within the last 3 months with someone about some really bad behavior that was not being addressed. And I was like, hey, what are you going to do about that? Well, and I said, that anything you don't address, you co-sign. You're co-signing this is okay. Are you okay with this? Because you're saying you are.
Right.
I'm sure that was not appreciated, but I felt pretty strongly about it at the time.
But it was honest.
It was honest. It was real, and it was true. It is true.
I mean, we have ample evidence, and we just talk to kids. They tell us that.
Yep.
So-and-so's not going to do anything about it.
Right.
That must mean it's okay. Right?
Yes. They don't care if I'm out in my car at lunch. You know what happens in cars at lunch? Oh my gosh, we should care a lot. And they're like, no, they don't really care. So we co-sign it and we allow it. And
we make our teachers' jobs so much harder. And we put our kids in positions that they're not mature enough to be in. And we send messages that are really powerful when what we celebrate and tolerate, when what we address or choose not to address speaks so much louder than anything else.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about your question of what makes them so open to other people being successful or having equity, basically, and fairness. And could it possibly be their developmental stage, which is very self-focused, so much so that they don't really care what you're doing because it doesn't affect them? Like in their stage of maturity, they don't realize how intertwined we are and how what we do affects each other. They're only thinking about how what they do affects themselves and what you do affects you. And maybe that's why they are kind of open about it.
Or, when I've been thinking, because I knew we were going to talk about this story this week about us in high school, and we went to a high school that was very diverse, but I also have been thinking about the messaging that kids get outside of their families. For us, at the time we grew up, it was Gordon Gekko and Greed is Good. It was Reaganomics. It was over the top,
Yes.
super competitive, accumulate as much wealth as you possibly can, even if you do it in unethical ways, right?
Right.
It was, I mean, the messaging, I think if we look back on it, thank goodness we had the teachers we had and the community members we had and the parents we had, because in the broader world, the messaging that we had was not the most healthy, certainly not the most conducive to a peaceful, collaborative world, right?
Definitely, because it was all about me, 100% about me. For the adults, I mean, kids are always that way to some degree, but that was the driving force of our culture, is get ahead however you can.
Yeah. And representation, although it was changing a little bit, we still didn't all see ourselves represented as people who own their own voices and choices and had power over our paths, right?
Yeah, that's such a slow change. And I feel like it's taking forever. It's taking forever.
Well, and it almost feels like we make a little progress and then we fall back.
Slide. Yes.
And when I think about us in high school, I think about me, because in terms of internal and thoughts, the only headspace I occupied was mine. I loved my peers. I loved my dance team friends. I loved the diverse group that we went to school with, but I don't know that I was aware or really thought about the struggles of people who didn't look like me. I loved them. We had a really good time, but I probably was unaware and didn't notice the things that maybe looking back I should have been aware of or noticed. I'm certain I didn't ask them, because I don't even know that I would have thought to ask the question.
Oh, no, that really wasn't a thing we knew how to do, or a thing that we had been enculturated to think about. We talked in our last episode about how I was friends with all these different groups and I just liked everyone. I didn't have to fit into only one lane, but as open as I was and as friendly as I was with all different types of people, I had no idea that anyone had a struggle, that anyone lived a different life than I did, that all families didn't have the same type of house, because my friends had the same type of house. They had the same type of parents. We had the same type of cars. And that's like just the most superficial level of it. So if I didn't know that the most superficial level wasn't equal, then I had no idea about the deeper, more important issues that some of our peers were facing.
Yes, same. And looking back now, as I try to reconstruct that, I see things in retrospect that I didn't recognize then, but we have a different lens now.
Right.
This was a diverse school. It was a great place to go to school. It was in the rural South.
Yeah.
So I imagine there were things said and done that I didn't notice or see, or advantages that some kids had and other kids didn't, that I didn't notice or see.
Well, I think about our school in terms of being a person of color. Yes, it was the rural South, and yes, it was diverse, but there was some big time busing going on.
Yes.
From Tampa out to the middle of nowhere.
Right. Florida was still under mandated desegregation at that time. And so kids did come from places farther away from us into our school.
And imagine being a person of color in that time and in that place. I think you either had to blend or sort of get pushed out. If I look back.
Yes, I think so too. And certainly there were way more white kids in our school than students of color in any group. Yeah. Yeah, looking back, it was an interesting time and place to be as a young person, and I was pretty oblivious to a lot of things. It's, our generation's kind of an interesting generation because the civil rights movement was not what it had been the generation before. And we were in that period of the 80s, where it really was an economic boom and other things just sort of became the focus.
Yes. Well, and I think at that time, people in power, leaders, thought the civil rights movement was done. They passed a couple laws and everything's fine. And now we can move on to other things. And I think when you look back at just our history, we realize, oh no, that was not finished. Those laws are not enough. It's not over. But we were coming of age at a time where it was over as far as society was concerned.
We were worried about other things, the threat of nuclear war with Russia, and rock music.
Hair bands. What is this hairspray doing to the ozone layer?
Yes, and you had to put, was it Tipper Gore's group? You had to put the warning label on the rock music. Labels. You could not have those explicit lyrics.
Exactly.
In the rock music.
We lost our focus, I think. I think that in the 80s began a wild loss of focus. That's probably true.
It was a crazy ride, some of the different messages we were getting.
Well, so here's this really strange thing, and I don't know if I've talked to you about this. During lockdown, like hardcore lockdown pandemic time, Jason and I started watching an old TV show that I just sort of remembered on the periphery of my mind from the 70s. I think it started in 1971, and it went to the early 80s. It was called The Barney Miller Show. Do you remember Barney Miller?
Dad, every afternoon, it was either The Rockford Files.
Okay.
Or the Barney Miller Show.
Okay.
Yes.
So we started watching the Barney Miller Show, and it's actually on a cable station, and we still DVR it every day, and we watched the entire series, and we've now probably watched the entire series 5 or 6 times. It's like comfort TV now.
Right.
And I get so bowled over by the issues they're talking about being the exact same issues we're talking about. Yeah. So in 1974, they were having the same problems, racially, with gender, with just equality in general that we're having today. It's amazing. You have to tune in and pick some of that up.
And if Barney Miller can't solve those issues,
right?
How are we supposed to figure this out?
It obviously might not be possible if Barney couldn't do it, especially with that crew.
And if he couldn't do it in an hour, then what are we supposed to do?
Exactly.
He could solve some crimes in an hour, though, and that helps.
But he could also solve kind of what teachers do, the small conflicts.
Yes.
He was great for bringing people together and helping them get grounded so that they could see how their conflict was not serving either side, that kind of thing. He did that really well. But and that's what we do. Like, we're fighting the same fight in a lot of ways. It just isn't big enough, and in 10 or 12 years Barney Miller couldn't do it.
I feel suddenly feeling so depressed.
I think that's why they canceled the show. They're like, Barney's not getting it done.
I mean, it's been 12 years.
Come on.
So speaking of people who have a gift for finding ways to address those issues, let's talk about Miss Gallant, the history teacher, and her student Shannon, who learned so much not from the Florida prescribed civics curriculum, but from something else. So would you, Laura, share Shannon's story about Miss Gallant with us?
Yes, I would love to. I was a junior in high school when I took Miss Gallant's history class. We often talked about the racial unrest in our nation's history and the ways we could still see racial tensions in our country. Although I attended a diverse school, students from different backgrounds rarely interacted. Because of our discussions in Miss Gallant's class, we noticed the segregated way students often gathered in the lunchroom or out in the courtyard. When we brought this up in class, our teacher challenged us to find opportunities for students from different backgrounds to work together. With Ms. Gallant's help, we decided to start a dance team. Because the dance team members had different cultural identities, each brought a different style of dance to the team. We learned from each other, and our choreography became a mix of our different styles. I have such happy memories of my time on the dance team. Working collaboratively with different kinds of people was a formative experience for me. I still connect with my former teammates, especially when I need a diverse set of perspectives. I'm grateful to Miss Gallant for helping me appreciate the beauty of diversity in dance and in life.
Oh, Miss Gallant.
So good.
So brilliant. She said, okay,
do something.
Yeah, you see this issue. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
How can I support you in that? Yeah.
I love the teachable moment, big or small. And this is a big one. And she took it. And I think you have to be brave to take a teachable moment, big or small. But you have to be like doubly courageous to take one this big.
Yeah. And we talked in the last episode about the temptation to be preachy.
Yes.
And she didn't. She just said, okay, you've noticed this. It's bothering you. Let's figure out what you can do about it. Yeah. Yep, and absolutely. They did. They came up with such a cool plan to not solve all the issues, certainly not change the world, but at least to bring people together, which is the first step.
Right. And so how many people are on a dance team? In my mind, this isn't like a formal dancerettes like you did. This is more like a dance crew. And so how many people are on that? 20, maybe 25 at the most?
A couple dozen, maybe.
And so this wasn't designed to change the world, but it was designed to change something important in their little culture within the school. So it really changed something for those 24, but seeing those 24 work together so seamlessly and create something so important and so exciting would have mattered and said something to all of those 2,000 students watching.
And that's what art does, right?
Yes.
If I think about music that I love, there's Jay-Z, there's LL Cool J, there's Mary J. Blige. There's something about art that crosses those racial boundaries that helps us understand other people's stories and experiences. Even painters, writers, Toni Morrison, I certainly gained some perspective just from her beautiful writing.
Oh, yeah. Well, don't get me started on Mother Morrison, as I call her in my classroom. I learned so much from her as a writer, but more as a human, for sure. I think this was a powerful story about empowering students to take action, and they actually came up with something that made that difference they were looking to make. They could feel it in their lives, but I believe that other people felt it as well.
There's something inspirational about a group of people coming together and creating art in a collaborative way. People who don't look alike, having conversations, having a common goal. That's a really powerful model. So many lessons in this simple question that Miss Gallant asked, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And somehow someone made that connection. Let's create a dance team,
which is like a wild answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's just make a dance team. Okay.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I think dance is the answer to most things. You know?
That's true. You're right.
Having a bad day,
Dance it off.
do a little dancing.
Yeah, that's true.
Having a good day, do a little dancing.
Celebrate with dance.
Dance brings people together. You watched Footloose.
I did. You're right. You're right. I did. And I have danced a time or two myself, not as professionally as you with the sequins and the little boots, but
I should clarify for the people. I was not that kind of dancer.
I'm talking about her uniform as a dancer
on the high school dance team.
Yes.
Let's clarify.
They wore a little sequin vest. It was very, very sparkly, and little white boots.
It was sparkly. It was. And I loved my dance team peeps. And we were a diverse group. And I learned a lot from my girls, Chelly Reed and Calandra Hendricks, about, I grew up doing ballet. They grew up doing hip hop, and we taught each other some things, and it was great.
Absolutely. We have a dance team that is probably similar to the one in our story, where it's a bunch of girls who come together and create dances, and they perform at the pep rally. And they're always, I'm partial to cheerleaders just because Kaylin was a cheerleader. And so I like to see what they can do, but I really enjoy the dance team because it's modern dance. So usually hip hop oriented, and they are this multicultural group that comes together. And I don't know how they fight out that choreography, right? I know compromises are being made. I know it. And it's just fun to watch because they are having fun with each other, and they're doing it in front of everyone as a model.
Yeah. We should all dance a little more.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I agree.
You used to do a little bit of dancing, as I recall, at the Shapes Fitness for.
Well, listen,
I was going to say for women.
I was going to say yes, I did do dancing as a child. I took the ballet, the tap, the jazz, lots of jazz, and then, yes, later in life, I went to Shapes Fitness. And I the dance exercise classes, the hip hop, the Zumba,
which is, yes, you embraced
all the cultures,
diverse forms of dance.
Mm-hmm. I like dancing. The more you can shake it, the better. And so the Zumba was perfect because that's all about shaking. Just like get things going.
Shake it off.
Yep.
Yeah. I just want to say that if anyone out there listening has any video of Laura doing Zumba or hip hop at the Shapes Fitness for Women, I might pay a handsome amount for access to that video.
You act like you've never seen me dance, Julie.
Well, not quite like.
I'm pretty sure that some of my moves. Hardcore moves came out at Kaylin's wedding.
And they probably were learned and inspired by the classes you took at the Shapes.
Classes I took at Shapes.
For women. So before we go completely off the rails, we probably should wrap up this episode of the Lessons That Last podcast. But we highly recommend, friends, this week that whether you're having a great day or a hard day, just a little dancing.
Dance it out.
Dance it out.
And I also want to remind you that we highly recommend that you take the teachable moment for yourself, for your own children, for the kids in your classrooms. Just take that little detour for the teachable moment because that's where the juice is.
Yeah. Thanks, teachers, for empowering students, for finding creative ways to bring us all together. We don't deserve you, teachers, but I'm so glad we have you. Have a great week.
Bye, friends. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you will subscribe to the Lessons That Last podcast wherever you listen. Give us a rating too, which will help other listeners find us. And don't forget to visit chalkandchances.com for more stories. You can also find more information on Julie's research in books. While you're there, take the quiz to find out what kind of memorable teacher you are. I took it and was surprised by what I found. I think you'll find good food for thought. Let us know about your quiz results. We hope you will meet us here each week and bring a friend to share the conversation.